My name is Victoria Sterling. I'm 34 years old, and I am the head of organizational development at Stellar Solutions. My role, as I see it, is to architect the most efficient, psychologically robust, and ethically progressive workplace possible. I believe the world isn't some chaotic, organic mess. It's a system, intricate and beautiful, waiting to be optimized. And I, armed with extensive research and cutting-edge theory, am its architect. I started at Stellar Solutions 3 years ago, brought in precisely to overhaul what the CEO, Mr. Alastair Finch, gently termed our antiquated people management approach. I found a culture that, while superficially productive, was riddled with what I identified as latent emotional toxicity. There was a pervasive lack of psychological safety, a reluctance to express genuine feelings, and an over-reliance on traditional, hierarchical communication channels. People were talking, yes, but they weren't connecting. They weren't aligning. They were just operating. And operating, in my professional opinion, is insufficient for true peak performance in the modern era. My first major initiative, the cornerstone of my vision for Stellar Solutions, was the Daily Effective Alignment Protocol, DA, as we affectionately called it. My research, drawn from myriad peer-reviewed articles on emotional intelligence, team cohesion, and neurolinguistic programming, indicated a clear correlation between daily emotional check-ins and enhanced workplace harmony. The theory was simple yet profound. By dedicating a brief, structured period each morning to openly share our emotional states, we would foster empathy, reduce unspoken tensions, and create an environment where everyone felt heard and valued. This, in turn, would lead to better collaboration, increased creativity, and ultimately, superior output. It was an undeniable truth, written in data and validated by experts. I designed the DA meeting meticulously. Every team, from the most junior engineers to senior management, was to convene for 15 minutes, promptly at 9 a.m. The structure was clear. Each member would, in turn, articulate their primary emotional state, briefly explain its origin if they wished, and then listen actively to their colleagues. My dement provided extensive training modules, complete with an approved emotional lexicon to encourage nuanced expression beyond simple good or bad. We emphasize non-judgment, active listening, and the critical importance of authenticity. We even developed a proprietary, effective sentiment tracker, a digital dashboard where team leads would log the overall emotional tenor of their morning sessions, allowing me to monitor the company's collective emotional health in real time. It was, I believed, a revolutionary step forward, a beacon of enlightened organizational design. Initial implementation, as with any progressive change, met with some resistance. There were murmurs from the older guard, engineers who grumbled about wasting time or touchy-feely nonsense. I addressed these concerns head-on, with calm authority and irrefutable data. I explained, patiently, that emotional well-being was not a distraction from work, but a prerequisite for it. I held mandatory workshops, presenting case studies of companies that had failed due to poor internal communication and unresolved emotional conflicts. I framed DA not as an optional perk, but as a vital investment in our collective future, a necessary evolution to shed the archaic, productivity-at-all-costs mentality of the past. Mr. Finch, to his credit, fully endorsed my vision, having seen my meticulously prepared projections of improved morale and reduced attrition. The DA protocol became company policy, mandatory across all domains, effective immediately. I felt a surge of pride, a sense of vindication. I was building a better world, one emotionally aligned team at a time. The system was in place, and I was certain it would yield precisely the results my theories promised. The first few weeks of daily effective alignment were, from my perspective, a resounding success. My effective sentiment tracker showed a steady upward trend in positive and neutral constructive emotional states. Team leads reported increased awareness of individual stress points and a general sense of camaraderie. I frequently dropped into various DA sessions, observing the teams as they shared. I saw hesitant smiles transform into confident nods, heard tentative expressions evolve into articulate declarations of feeling. Of course, there were always a few outliers, individuals who struggled with the vulnerability, who offered curt, "I'm fine," or neutral responses. But these were, I reasoned, simply individuals who required more time to adapt to the new paradigm, to unlearn years of emotional suppression. My team and I offered additional one-on-one coaching sessions, gently guiding them towards a more open and authentic self-expression. I remembered a killer session with the product development team. Young Mr. Harrison, typically reserved and focused solely on code, confessed to feeling anxious about a looming deadline. His team lead, Ms. Chin, immediately offered support, suggesting a reallocation of tasks. The next day, Mr. Harrison reported feeling relieved and grateful. This, I thought, was precisely the magic of DA, proactively addressing emotional friction before it solidified into outright conflict or burnout. It was an early warning system, a preventative measure for the very human elements of a complex machine. Such instances reinforced my belief that DA was not just effective, but essential. We were not merely building software, we were building a community. However, as the weeks turned into months, subtle shifts began to emerge, shifts that I initially dismissed as mere integration challenges. The 15-minute meetings, once a crisp exercise, began to stretch. Some teams, particularly those with larger rosters, found themselves needing 20, sometimes 25 minutes to accommodate everyone sharing. My guidelines were explicit about brevity and focus, yet human nature, it seemed, struggled with conciseness when given a platform for personal expression. I issued a company-wide memo reminding everyone of the time constraints, emphasizing that DA was about alignment, not extended therapy sessions. The duration of the meetings did tighten somewhat, but the underlying issue remained. 15 minutes, every single workday, was a significant chunk of time for dements already operating on tight schedules. Then came the first whispers of genuine discontent. Not about the concept of DA itself, which few dared to openly challenge, but about its practical implications. I overheard a conversation in the break room where a senior analyst, known for her sharp intellect and even sharper wit, quipped, "I'm so emotionally aligned by 9:30 a.m., I forget what I was supposed to be working on by 10. It was a joke, of course, but it carried a sting. My initial interpretation was that this was typical resistance to change, a sign that we were pushing boundaries, which was a good thing. True innovation always ruffles feathers. Yet, the complaints, though indirect, began to multiply. Project managers started reporting minor delays, attributing them vaguely to morning complexities or team recalibration. I delved into the effective sentiment tracker, expecting to find a corresponding dip in positive emotions. Instead, the data remained stubbornly, almost unnaturally, high. Almost everyone, day after day, reported feelings like energized, optimistic, focused, or content. It was a symphony of workplace bliss, according to the numbers. But my intuition, finely tuned by years of studying human systems, began to sense a dissonance. The numbers were too perfect. During one of my routine check-ins, I sat in on the marketing team's DA. Ms. Anya Sharma, a usually vivacious and expressive individual, succinctly declared, feeling productive and ready to tackle the Q3 campaign. Her smile seemed a fraction too wide, her eyes a shade too bright. Her colleague, Mr. Ben Carter, offered a concise, feeling motivated, excited for the day's challenges. There was a rhythm to it, a polished, almost rehearsed quality. No one delved deeper than a superficial statement. No one offered anything remotely negative, not even a mildly frustrated by my commute, or a bit tired. It was a flawless performance, replicated across the room. It dawned on me then. The sincerity was dying. People weren't truly sharing, they were performing. They had learned the script. They understood that a good DA response was brief, positive, and offered no potential for follow-up questions or, worse, for being flagged for further emotional processing by my dement. To admit to genuine frustration, anxiety, or even simple boredom was to risk extra attention, to disrupt the flow, to become an anomaly in a system designed for smooth alignment. The irony was not lost on me, though I quickly pushed it aside. My initiative, designed to foster authenticity, was now inadvertently encouraging its suppression. This was not a flaw in my theory, I reasoned, but a flaw in human nature, a tendency towards conformity that needed to be more effectively managed. The consequences began to manifest more concretely. The digital marketing team, for instance, missed a crucial launch window for a major client due to internal communication issues. When I investigated, I discovered that a key piece of design feedback had been silently stewing for days. The designer, rather than expressing her frustration or disagreement during DA, had instead offered a placid, feeling cooperative, and then procrastinated on the revisions, fearing she would be perceived as difficult if she brought up the underlying conflict. The project manager, who had likewise reported feeling optimistic, had failed to notice the delay until it was too late. This wasn't an isolated incident. More and more often, genuine issues were being shunted into private emails or hushed conversations after the DA, bypassing the very mechanism designed to address them. The psychological safety I had meticulously cultivated was, paradoxically, becoming a breeding ground for superficiality and hidden resentment. The most damning evidence came from the productivity reports. While my effective sentiment tracker glowed with positivity, the hard numbers from the operations dashboards told a different story. Project completion rates were down by nearly 8% across the board in Q2. Client satisfaction scores, once a point of pride for Stellar Solutions, had stagnated. Key performance indicators for almost every dimension showed a disturbing plateau, if not an outright dip. When I presented my positive DA metrics to Mr. Finch, he nodded politely, but his gaze kept drifting back to the red figures on the revenue charts. "Victoria," he said, his voice measured, "I appreciate the focus on our people's well-being. But our investors are asking why our well-being isn't translating into stronger financial performance." I felt a prickle of annoyance. My theories were sound. The data from countless academic studies confirmed the benefits of emotional intelligence in the workplace. The problem, I concluded, wasn't DA itself. It was the implementation, or rather, the people's failure to fully embrace it. They were merely going through the motions, failing to internalize the deeper principles. It was a failure of their commitment to progressive values, not a flaw in my meticulously designed system. The cracks in my carefully constructed edifice deepened with each passing week. The initial ripple of discontent had evolved into a silent, pervasive hum of frustration beneath the veneer of forced positivity. Employees, I observed, were becoming masters of the DA smile, a polite, almost beatific expression that conveyed contentment without betraying a single genuine emotion. Their responses in the morning meetings were now perfectly calibrated, generic affirmations, often recycled from previous days or borrowed from colleagues. Feeling centered and ready to embrace the day's challenges. Optimistic about collaborative opportunities. My energy levels are high, looking forward to contributing. It was a linguistic performance art, perfectly executed, utterly devoid of soul. My proprietary effective sentiment tracker, once my pride and joy, became a testament to this grand charade. The dashboard consistently displayed a sea of green, indicating overwhelmingly positive or constructively neutral emotions across the company. My weekly reports to Mr. Finch were filled with graphs showing steadily climbing morale scores, reductions in reported conflict, because no one dared to report it, and an overall aura of emotional stability. Yet, the accompanying revenue reports and project completion rates continued their downward slide, a glaring discrepancy that I attributed to external market forces, unexpected project complexities, or a lingering resistance to my progressive initiatives. Never, not for a moment, did I consider that my solution itself was the problem. The managerial burden became palpable. Team leads, whom I had trained meticulously to facilitate DA sessions and provide empathetic feedback, were now caught in a squeeze. They were mandated to run the meetings, encourage authenticity, which, by now, was a laughable concept, and then report the overwhelmingly positive sentiment to my dement. Simultaneously, they were facing increasing pressure from above to deliver results that were being directly impeded by the very protocol they were enforcing. I overheard one manager, Ms. Evelyn Reed, A usually stoic and efficient individual, lamenting to appear, I spend 45 minutes every morning managing feelings, my team's and my own, because I have to pretend everything's fine too, before I can even think about actual work. We're drowning in good vibes, but sinking in deliverables. I chose to interpret her words as a sign of her own emotional fatigue, a personal challenge she needed to overcome, rather than a systemic issue. The most disheartening consequence, one that truly began to gnaw at me despite my unwavering conviction, was the exodus of talent. Stellar Solutions had always prided itself on attracting top-tier professionals, particularly engineers and designers who valued autonomy, intellectual challenge, and direct, efficient communication. Now, they were leaving. The exit interviews, conducted by my own team, often cited lack of focus on core business objectives, excessive procedural overhead, and a culture that feels more like a therapy session than a workplace. I dismissed these as the complaints of individuals who lacked the emotional maturity to thrive in a truly progressive environment, those who preferred the old ways of detached, transactional interaction. They simply weren't a good fit for the new stellar solutions I was building. Their door, I told myself, was simply natural selection, pruning the less adaptable elements from our evolving organizational tree. The hyper-independence that defined my personal philosophy mirrored these professional challenges. My last serious relationship with a physician named Dr. Alex Thorne had ended 6 months prior. He was a kind, intelligent man, but he had often spoken of feeling emotionally walled off from me. Victoria, he'd once said, his voice laced with frustration, you manage our relationship like it's a corporate merger. We have independent accounts, independent spaces, equal shares of responsibilities. But where's the us? Where's the vulnerability, the messy, beautiful interconnectedness? I had bristled, explaining that my approach ensured equality, prevented dependence, and fostered individual strength. Needing someone, in my eyes, was a weakness, a concession to an outdated, patriarchal dependency model. I offered him a luxurious roommate arrangement where our lives intersected without truly merging. He wanted a home. I offered him a well-structured cohabitation agreement. His eventual doer, claiming he needed more than a perfectly balanced spreadsheet of life, only reinforced my conviction that traditional emotional entanglements were inefficient and ultimately unsatisfying. His inability to appreciate my strength, my self-sufficiency, was his failing, not mine. My professional life, I felt, reflected this same principle. Emotional control was the key to true success, for individuals and for organizations alike. But now, even Mr. Finch, once my staunchest supporter, began to look at me with a new, unsettling skepticism. Victoria, he'd started saying more frequently, I understand the long-term vision, but we're starting to see real short-term damage. The integration challenges are hitting our bottom line hard. We need to deliver this quarter. Our biggest client, Omnicorp, is threatening to pull their contract if the Nexus project isn't back on track immediately. The Nexus project was our flagship initiative, a multi-million-dollar software suite meant to revolutionize supply chain management. It was critically behind schedule, plagued by miscommunications, design disputes that festered unspoken, and a general air of subdued panic among the team. And the irony? The Nexus team, ironically, consistently reported some of the highest effective sentiment scores. The very system I had championed, the daily effective alignment protocol, had created an environment where genuine issues were not merely suppressed, but actively disguised. No one on the Nexus team dared to express their true anxieties, their burnout, their frustrations with ambiguous requirements or interdimensional conflicts during DA. To do so would be to admit weakness, to signal a lack of alignment, to potentially draw unwanted attention from my dement. So, they smiled, they reported feeling focused and collaborative, and behind those carefully constructed facades, the project slowly, inexorably crumbled. I, in my ivory tower of data and theory, continued to interpret the green lights on my dashboard as a sign of success, even as the real world outside my office window spiraled into chaos. The impending crisis for Stellar Solutions wasn't merely a financial hiccup, it was an existential threat. The Omnicorp contract, worth tens of millions and critical for our market reputation, was on the brink of collapse due to the delays and quality issues with the Nexus project. Mr. Finch had called an emergency executive board meeting, an unprecedented gathering, and my presence was explicitly requested. I prepared my presentation meticulously, a comprehensive report detailing the robust emotional health of our teams, bolstered by countless graphs from my effective sentiment tracker. I intended to argue that the Nexus project struggles were an anomaly, a complex technical challenge unrelated to our progressive people policies. I would emphasize the long-term benefits of DA, the foundational strength it was building for a future of unparalleled collaboration. The boardroom was a stark, intimidating space, filled with the company's most powerful decision-makers. Mr. Finch sat at the head, his expression grim. Beside him sat Ms. Eris Thorne, the formidable head of sales, whose quarterly reports were usually glowing. Today, they were deeply in the red. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable anxiety that no amount of emotional alignment could dissipate. I began my presentation, my voice calm and authoritative, outlining the triumphs of DA, the consistent positivity, the reduction in reported workplace conflicts, the fostering of a more empathetic culture. As you can see, I projected a vibrant green chart onto the screen. Our internal metrics show a workforce that is more aligned, more emotionally resilient, and, ultimately, better equipped to handle the demands of a high-pressure environment. But Ms. Thorne cut me off, her voice sharp, bypassing the usual corporate politeness. With all due respect, Victoria, your internal metrics are completely disconnected from reality. My sales team is losing clients. Our retention rates are plummeting. I have top performers telling me they can't get any actual work done because they're spending their mornings in mandatory, feeling circles, pretending everything's wonderful. This isn't emotional resilience, it's a mass delusion. I felt a surge of indignation. Ms. Thorne, I understand that change can be uncomfortable, but uncomfortable, she interrupted again, slamming a hand on the table. Our Q2 revenue is down 15%. The Omnicorp deal, which was supposed to secure our Q3, is failing. That's not uncomfortable, Victoria, that's catastrophic. The Nexus project's difficulties are a complex technical challenge, I retorted, trying to regain control. They are unrelated to the psychological well-being of the team, which, according to our data, is at an all-time high. I clicked to another slide, showing the Nexus team's glowing effective sentiment scores. Then, a voice from the far end of the table, quiet but resonating with frustration, spoke up. It was Mr. David Miller, the head of engineering, a man known for his calm demeanor and pragmatic approach, rarely one to raise his voice. He had been with Stellar Solutions for 20 years. Victoria, with all due respect to your theories, you're missing the point. The Nexus team is feeling anxious. They are frustrated. They are utterly burned out. But they can't say it. Not in your effective alignment meetings. I stared at him, my mind reeling. That's simply not what our data indicates, David. My team conducts regular sentiment analyses. The scores are consistently positive. Because they're lying. David's voice rose, a raw edge of desperation in it. They've learned that telling the truth, expressing real frustration, is a waste of time at best and a career impediment at worst. Who wants to be flagged for emotional processing when they're already 2 weeks behind schedule? Who wants to be seen as unaligned or negative when everyone else is reporting optimism and high energy? He leaned forward, his gaze sweeping across the room. The DA protocol, Victoria, was supposed to foster honesty. Instead, it's created a culture of performative emotional labor. People spend 15 minutes every morning crafting a perfect, positive lie, so they can then spend the rest of the day hiding the real problems. We've got engineers silently disagreeing with design choices because they don't want to bring conflict to the DA. Project managers who see critical blockers but report feeling confident because they don't want to be perceived as stressing the team. Our psychological safety isn't safe at all. It's a pressure cooker for unspoken resentment and suppressed failure. A murmur went through the room. Heads nodded, some in grim agreement, others in dawning realization. Mr. Finch, who had been listening intently to David, finally spoke. David is right. I've heard similar sentiments indirectly for weeks. Victoria, your program, while well-intentioned, has had unforeseen and utterly detrimental consequences. We are bleeding talent, losing clients, and our flagship project is on the verge of implosion, not despite your initiatives, but it appears in large asterisk because asterisk of them. My world tilted. The theoretical framework I had so carefully constructed, the irrefutable data I had gathered, the vision of a perfectly aligned, emotionally intelligent workplace, it was all being dismantled before my eyes. They were blaming me. They were blaming my system. My theories were perfect. The human element, the messy, unpredictable, illogical human element, was failing to conform. It was their fault, not mine. They were simply too resistant, too unenlightened, to grasp the true genius of my design. But the look in Mr. Finch's eyes, a cold, hard disappointment, told me that my meticulous rationalizations would no longer suffice. Victoria, he said, his voice quiet but firm, the daily effective alignment protocol, as it currently stands, is immediately suspended. We need to save this company. And to do that, we need to get back to work. The silence that followed was deafening, a hollow echo in the void where my perfect system once stood. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The daily effective alignment protocol, my magnum opus, was not merely suspended. It was unceremoniously abolished. A company-wide memo, circulated just hours after the executive meeting, announced a strategic reprioritization of operational focus, effectively erasing DA from our daily routines. My dement, once the vanguard of progressive organizational change, was stripped of its funding for new initiatives, its influence curtailed, and its very existence placed under review. I was not explicitly fired, but my role was rendered largely ceremonial, a phantom limb on a body that no longer needed it. My grand architecture had crumbled, leaving behind only the dust of shattered ambition. I retreated into my office, a space that once buzzed with the energy of innovative thought, now feeling sterile and suffocating. The effective sentiment tracker on my monitor, once a vibrant tapestry of green, now displayed nothing but an error message, disconnected from its data source. It was a digital tombstone for my failed vision. I was surrounded by my meticulously organized binders, filled with academic articles, peer-reviewed studies, and my own comprehensive proposals, all testifying to the undeniable logic of my approach. Yet, reality, messy and illogical, had rejected it. The silence of the office without the mandatory morning check-ins was unsettling at first. Then, slowly, a different kind of noise began to emerge. The low hum of genuine conversations, hushed and direct, as people openly discussed challenges. The occasional frustrated sigh, no longer suppressed. The spontaneous laughter from the break room, no longer forced. Productivity dashboards, which had been stagnant for months, began to show tentative upward ticks. Mr. Finch, during a brief, perfunctory meeting, acknowledged the positive shift, but made no mention of my contributions, or lack thereof. The company was moving on, without me, leaving me isolated in the ruins of my own making. My hyper-independence, once my fortress, now felt like a gilded cage. I had prided myself on not needing anyone, on standing strong and self-sufficient. I had built my career around managing systems, optimizing interactions, and avoiding the messy entanglements of genuine human emotion. I had dismissed vulnerability as weakness and true connection as an inefficient drain on resources. And now I was alone, professionally sidelined, personally detached. One evening, browsing a social media feed, a rare indulgence for me, usually reserved for professional networking, I saw an update from Dr. Alex Thorne, my forerunner. He was smiling, genuinely, vibrantly, holding a baby. Beside him stood a woman, her hand resting on his arm, a picture of warmth and contentment. The caption spoke of their new adventure as a family. My heart, a muscle I usually kept under strict control, gave a strange, painful lurch. They looked happy, truly happy. Not aligned, Not optimized, but simply profoundly connected. They had built a home, a messy, organic, loving home. And I, in my pursuit of perfect control and an unassailable independence, had merely built walls. I thought of his words, "Where's the US? Where's the vulnerability, the messy, beautiful interconnectedness?" I had dismissed them as his inability to handle a strong, modern woman. Now, looking at their picture, the truth, cold and unyielding, began to seep into my carefully constructed logic. My strength, my fierce independence, my refusal to need or be needed, had not led to liberation, but to isolation. My unwavering belief in the right way, as dictated by theory and data, had blinded me to the profound, irreducible humanity that defied all systems, all controls. I was a modern control architect, and I had designed myself into a solitary tower, perfectly structured, perfectly managed, and utterly, tragically empty. The silence in my office and in my life was no longer merely professional. It was the crushing weight of a success that had ultimately failed me, a victory over vulnerability that had left me utterly vulnerable to loneliness. I had sought to master the human system, and in doing so, I had lost my own place within it.